This is a dark moment at a dark time, dark season, and we have a challenging way that we're starting Hanukkah. Right now it's 2025, but I think what we'll talk about is relevant throughout different times of the year and certainly in years to come. In 2025, Hanukkah is about to start for us, but has started in other parts of the world due to time zones. And we're reflecting a little bit about the tragedy that is occurred in Australia, in Sydney at Bondi Beach, and the shooting that happened there, as well as the unfolding tragedy of the people who are injured and experiencing loss in the Jewish world more broadly, and thinking a little bit about how we feel, not just you and me as rabbis and as colleagues, but as people around us, the people in our worlds, and the ways that the Jewish world is responding, even in just now only a handful of hours later. But sharing that might be helpful to other people. You and I were texting about a piece of Torah that we both found meaningful this moment, thought might be an opportunity for us to share that with other people who might be watching this later. And then we would take some time to talk about how we can make this Hanukkah in the face of this tragedy more meaningful, and to hold space for light and things like that.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite and the framing. It's good to find some togetherness when the world feels so overwhelming and bleak sometimes, especially kind of feels particularly cruel, bitterly ironic to going into a holiday that is so thematically connected to spiritual uplift, fighting for our religious legacy and heritage, and quite literally like taking flame and having it permeate something so dark, and to read and hear about the events, it just sort of is, it's almost too on the nose.
I know for me, as I've been unpacking this again, just for this, for you and I woke up this morning with this news from my own experience 7 years ago, being a rabbi in Pittsburgh, seeing the number 11 of the 11 dead. I believe that the number has increased now, but waking up to that number resonated deeply to the 11 who were murdered in Pittsburgh, community of which I lived and served, is just a powerful reminder that this is not going anywhere. And this is something that seems to be increasing in its volume. And I think what I'm holding, in addition to a sense of grief and sadness and challenge, is also a sense that the Jewish world continues to show that we care about each other, that we hold each other across oceans and across boundaries and geography, that the Jewish world stays connected and together. And that, I think, is the two main feelings I'm feeling. It's a sense of real sadness and grief and sort of all the trauma responses I'm having from the last 7 years, but also a sense of hope and holding of where I think what it continues to show the Jewish community comes together.
And a good reminder of, people who perpetrate these acts don't see our ideological differences. And so, there's something sort of powerful there in thinking like, yes, I could come up with a laundry list of reasons why you and I are different from any other Jew in practice and in ideology or belief, and yet we're targeted because we're Jewish. And that, pernicious way of being in the world has existed for a long time, is going to continue to exist. So what can we do to promote more things where we're gathering together, being proud together, spreading goodness together? Because the other stuff doesn't, it matters, but it doesn't really matter in the scheme and the scope of life and the Jewish peoplehood.
One of the things that you and I were talking about earlier today before we hopped onto this conversation was a piece of text, a book that you and I have both studied together and I care about very deeply. It's Tzidkat Tzadik or Tzidkas Tzadik, depending on your pronunciation persuasion. Reb Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin, his book of teachings, and one in particular, he uses the language of light and darkness. Perfect for Hanukkah, perfect for this sort of emotional state that we're living in. And so I think that this is an opportunity for us to share a little bit of that Torah and to why it was meaningful for us. And so I'll just, in brief, share that Reb Tzadok explains that there is a pattern where a day and night roll from one to the next, and that this is a metaphor for a life of a human being, a life of people in general, that there's light and there's darkness and there's ups and there's downs. And it goes on to explain with the quoting the Baal Shem Tov that this is actually representative of a much larger system. It's not just day and night, but the fact that a particular verse quotes that there's a pattern of 7 times a righteous person falls down and comes back up, stands back up, that this 7 represents a week. And that this metaphor of light and dark, day and night, is really a weekly cycle and a seasonal cycle, and this pattern that repeats over and over. Do you feel, we'll sort of pause there, do you feel like that metaphor fits this moment, Adir?
Yeah, actually, not in a way that I had thought about before, but there's a notion about that line that you quoted that a righteous person falls 7 times and gets up, and the question is asked, like, why does it need to specify a righteous person? It's not, you wouldn't normally associate righteousness with falling down. And one answer that speaks to me that I think could connect to this moment is what makes a righteous person righteous are a number of things, but one of them is sort of the fortitude and perseverance to be able to remember that at fall 1 and fall 2 and fall 3, all the way through the end, there's always within them a spark of resilience to be able to actually get back up. Like sometimes we associate righteousness with a heightened religiosity or a high level of faith, but maybe also righteousness is just being able to hear that little voice inside of you that says, yeah, you just fell 7 times, but why not this time? You could get back up and then never fall again, or not fall for a while.
I love that. And in the sense, I think for Reb Tzadok, all of us contain the capacity for righteousness. That category is actually applicable to all of us.
Yeah, I think so. It's an expansive category, even if we might think it's very limited to a select group of people.
Reb Tzadok goes on to say, in this metaphor of light and darkness and seasonality, that this repeats over and over again. And he says, however, even in these times of darkness, it's important, it's necessary to remember that God created other lights beyond just the sun, the light of the moon and the light of stars. And he quotes from the Talmud saying that the light of the stars is also light. Right? We might not think that they're light, that they're far away, that they're really small, but actually accumulation that they are in fact light, that there is no such thing as a complete darkness. I find that image particularly powerful because I think it's easy to remember or to think in these moments when it feels overwhelming. And I think I feel overwhelmed at this moment. I'm sure other people do too, that there's nothing good. There's no redeeming quality. It's all darkness. And the metaphor of saying, okay, well, the sun might be down, but the moon is there and the stars are there is actually a really powerful reminder that it's very rare, if ever, that it's a perfect, complete darkness. And that even in the season where it feels dark, right? We're in the middle where we live, it's winter and Hanukkah starting tonight, that it's like really the end of the darkest parts of the year, that in fact, it isn't a complete darkness, which again invites us to have a conversation about Hanukkah as well.
Yeah, that's it's a good reminder, and it also feels helpful in a moment like this. I think there's, and this is some work that I have to do. Sometimes I feel like in the moments where people talk about Hanukkah as like bringing light into the darkness, there's something about that seems a bit contrived to me. And I have a bend towards that feeling, so I recognize that it's good to think that. And also, it makes me feel like we're trying to run away from the darkness, when I think what this teaching is trying to say actually is you can stay in the darkness and still remember that within that dark framework, there are lights there. They might not be the big, flashy lights that we love to think about when it's bright out, but sort of to be able to recognize, especially like, we also haven't talked about this. We all went to sleep last night following the news of another horrific tragedy, a shooting that's still unfolding, kind of the ramifications of. So, you go to sleep with one tragedy in your head, you wake up with another one on your screen. So, reminding ourselves that we can be in a dark place, and we can know that within that dark place there are access points specifically made for darkness, stars and the moon, and that there's real strength in being able to sort of hold on to them, or even just notice them, honestly. Maybe not even to do so much, but just to note that, okay, I know that they're there somewhere. Even if I can't see them now, I know that that moon and those stars are accessible to me.
I think about when I go to sleep or when I put my child to sleep, that when I turn off the light, it immediately gets really, really dark. And it takes a moment for my eyes to adjust. And I remember trying to explain this to my toddler and saying, it's not as dark as you think it is. Just be patient. There will be more light. You just have to let your eyes adjust. And I think in the immediacy of a tragedy, there is a desire to be like, everything is dark. And that's a reasonable and appropriate response. And some of the thing that we have to do is just hold ourselves, hold each other until our eyes adjust, until we're able to see beyond just the darkness, that those two time periods actually do exist, right? I might be in my bright house and I open the door and I step outside and it's dark. It's
Yeah.
nighttime. But actually, if I let myself adjust, I can see I can see the moon and the stars. And I think as it invites in Hanukkah, when we light the candles, there is that moment also where it's really dark until I
Mm.
light it, until there's nothing, until there's something. And I think about that when I do Havdalah as well, where I like to turn off all the lights so it's pitch black. Again, not perfect darkness, but pitch black. And then I light the match for Havdalah. There's the drama of the revelation of that light. And what Reb Tzadok here is saying is it's actually not that revelatory brightness all in one moment. It's an ever-present light that we may not even notice. It's still there, even if we don't always notice it.
Yeah. It's not surprising, Jeremy, that I also went to Toddler Bedtime, and my toddler often uses the line of, he says, not see anything when we turn the lights off. And like you said, I try to remind him in that moment of, well, actually, wait, and then I do something silly so he can see it in the sort of perceived darkness. And it had me thinking as you were talking, and then that image popped into my head. So much of what we're trying to do when we think about in our house raising our children is to equip them with the skills necessary to foster some amount of independence, to create perseverance, courage within themselves, resolve. And I think I'm thinking about the debate in the Talmud that the rabbis had around, do we light from 1 to 8 or 8 to 1? And as most of us know, we light like the school of Hillel said, which is to start at 1 and work your way up to 8. But one of the things I like to think about from 8 to 1, this is a little subversive Hanukkah Torah, is it teaches you that, or it prepares you for the fact that at the end of Hanukkah, however you count up or down, your menorah is not going to be lit anymore. There's not going to be light from that. And so it is being bequeathed to us that we are the ones who have to be the light bringers after the fact. So when we diminish our light, it actually is not saying the light is gone. It's saying, okay, now it's on you. So that when you come out from Hanukkah, you have a different amount of responsibility. And I think especially the fact that we haven't even started it, but that this Hanukkah is already going to be so informed or connected to these events of the last 18 or so hours, I think we're going to feel a heightened sense of that, sort of what's my personal responsibility that I'm taking from this Hanukkah and bringing out into the world a little.
I think for me, Hanukkah and this molding it is just, the fact is that we're not allowed to use the Hanukkah candle.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to use it to illuminate our space, which is in contradiction a little bit to what Reb Tzadok is saying here, that it's there to exist. Its light is part of its quality, and it's not there to read a book to, or it's there to be present for, to slow down, to stop, to hold the space for the light. And I know some of my most spiritual moments are sitting and just staring at the light of the Hanukkah. Some of my own, spiritual journey is rooted in those moments. And I think that is part of what this year can bring, what Hanukkah bring, is a chance to slow down. We live in a world right now that everything is so fast, and there's fast responses and fast, running from one thing to the next. Actually, the short time period of Hanukkah where the candles are lit, because they burn relatively quickly, is to slow down, to be present. And so as a way to end this video and to perhaps help those who are watching it, what advice might you give to someone who is feeling a lot of the things we're feeling in light of these two, pardon the pun, in light of these two pieces of Torah, of both Hanukkah and Reb Tzadok? What do you think people should hold right now? What do you think might be useful to them?
I'm thinking a lot about the number of Hanukkah candles we light, which equals 36 if you count all the 8 days. 36 is a number that we associate in Judaism and in the Torah with the amount of times we're reminded to help those who are vulnerable. And so I think oftentimes one of the ways to combat a sense of nihilism or, oh, here we go again, I can't do anything, is actually to remind ourselves in good partnership with your reminder to just sit maybe for a little while, but also with a nod to the fact that there are those who are in need in ways that we might be in need too, but there are vulnerable people out there who could use something. And maybe we can take some time this Hanukkah to reflect a little bit about who is vulnerable around us, and that vulnerability can manifest in different ways. And asking yourself, what can I do? Like, what capacity do I have to be able to help out?
I love that. The only thing I would add is that Hanukkah comes with two stories that are a little bit in contradiction, which are, we have the story of a military victory of the Maccabees over the Assyrians, the Greeks, and we have this story of the miracle of oil. And we feel different things about them, probably. And I think that's true for this Hanukkah. And I think for Reb Tzadok is that it's okay to feel more than one thing at a time. That life is full of complications and challenging moments and challenging feelings. There's ups, there's downs, there's light, there's dark, there's day, there's night. These things happen. And it's not about saying, well, I have to feel a particular way in one. It's about saying they're both true. We have to hold them both, that both are part of the reality. And it's important to, as much as we grieve the challenges that the Jewish world is facing and the community in Sydney in particular, that it's okay to have fun with your kids, and it's okay to read a book and to take a break from the news, and then to find space to be present with it again, and then to take breaks and to just be okay with holding the feelings at the same time, because that's part of what life is. And Judaism never shies away from that kind of truth, which is that it's all happening all the time, everywhere, all at once, as they say.
Yeah, that's relevant wisdom for the moment, or for life at large, I would say. Thanks for teaching it.
All right. Thank you for your Torah as well. And thank you all for watching.
Thanks.